I've been reflecting on the word crazy a lot, where I'm like, we think crazy is bad. And I don't agree with that. I think crazy is good. I think
Mm.
crazy is what creates a beautiful, wild, amazing life, is being crazy. So lately I've been thinking about it and I'm like, I think I want to be crazy. Welcome to A Way of Thinking podcast. This podcast is dedicated to lighting the way towards greater inner peace and purpose. Hello and welcome to this episode of A Way of Thinking. I'm your host, Jessica Huang, and this is a little bit of a different twist this week. So this episode is more of a conversation than an interview. And my guest this week is Lisa Francisco. And Lisa is a sacred feminine mentor, and she focuses on embracing the divinity within and reclaiming your wild, true self. And Lisa and I have a beautiful conversation in this episode, and we talk a lot about forging your own path, really stepping into what is true for you. We also share a lot around our own spiritual practices, and we talk a lot about the ins and outs of the entrepreneurship journey, what that has been like for us, some of the ups and downs, the struggles through it all, and really talking about what has helped us moving forward. So keep listening to hear my episode with Lisa. And before we get started, let me make a few quick announcements. So first off, I want to make a big shout out to our listener, Andre Tataru, for donating to the podcast. So thank you so much, Andre, for your support of A Way of Thinking podcast. And if you would like to get a little shout out and to donate to the podcast, you can do so at jessicahuangcoaching.com/donate. And secondly, if you are someone that is looking to finally move out of your corporate career and you're just looking at your job going, this is not for me anymore, and you want to embrace your inner creative and move into the creative career that you've always dreamed of, then I invite you to book a free strategy session with me. And you can do so at my website, jessicahuangcoaching.com/strategy. And I'm so looking forward to supporting you in your journey. And now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Lisa Francisco.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Francisco. I am a sacred feminine mentor. And here we also have Jessica Huang of A Way of Thinking podcast.
Yes, hi, I'm Jessica Huang, and I am a purpose coach, and I am the host of A Way of Thinking podcast. And yeah, so we're having a little fun here today and we're both interviewing each other essentially.
Yes, we are. So Jess and I know each other from a different coaching program, and I actually saw you getting coached. And I remember I was DMing you like, "Hey, you weren't even talking about your podcast. I saw that you had a podcast that you were talking about it, or I think the coach mentioned it." And that's when I Googled and I looked you up. I was like, "Oh, hey, like she and I should do a podcast swap." And then the more that I heard what you were speaking about, I realized we have so many similarities. And so I just wanted to have you on my podcast. And I thought just because we each have our own podcast, rather than creating two separate episodes, why don't we just interview each other and just have an organic conversation? Because there are so many similarities in our stories, what we both talk about in our businesses. And so that's why we're here today.
Yeah. And I loved it. I got your message and I was like, yeah, absolutely. I saw what you were about and I was like, we will have so much to talk about without a doubt. So we were just swapping some ideas and I'm like, there is so much we can discuss. It is endless. So I am really excited about this.
Oh my goodness. And this is interesting because it'll be the first time that I'm learning about you too. Even though we spoke before, I
Mm.
feel like this is an opportunity to get even deeper. And so I would just love to know the evolution of your coaching business. Because one of the things that I that I know of you and how you also left your corporate job, that I speak about is just helping women embody their true selves, helping women embody the wild woman archetype, which is really about learning to reclaim your wild, true self, even if it doesn't make sense to anybody else, and learning to forge a path that is for you and not for other people. So, really learning to find your voice, be seen, and have the courage to follow through. And I feel like you have exemplified that in your story. And so I would love for you to share the beginning and how you got to where you are now.
Oof, yeah, it's so much to say there. I love when you were talking about the wild woman archetype. I was sitting there going, wow, that definitely is something I can relate to because I feel like my whole life there's been this part of me that just always wanted to go against the grain. It was always hard for me to kind of be that buttoned up version of myself that I was trying to be when I was in my corporate job. And I feel like that definitely resonated with me. But yes, so to give you a short version of the story, I was, I kind of went the traditional path. I worked in corporate finance for a decade, and I was the person that was climbing the corporate ladder, doing the right thing, kind of living really a life that on paper looked pretty good, like pretty on point to like what I was supposed to do. And I felt like I was fulfilling all these things. And yet there was this part of me, I think, for a long time that just felt like this can't be it. Like this can't be all that life is. And I felt out of sync with who I was in my day job and who I was in my regular life. And so I feel like there was this kind of slow unraveling where it was like there were, I would make these decisions throughout my life that I felt like my parents would be like, what is our daughter doing? I was always kind of slightly going against the grain in little ways, but it wasn't until I really moved into this path that obviously I went very far against the grain. But basically what happened to me was I burned out in my job during the pandemic,
Mm.
and that was the time when it and I had this recurring thought of like, I want to change jobs, but it was always like, oh, I'm just going to change into something still in corporate, like I was going to go into marketing or something like that. But it was when I burned out in my job that I was just like, maybe this whole system is not right for me, maybe this
Mm.
whole lane is not where I want to be. And I started really thinking outside the box. And I had a wonderful one of my best friend was like, "Are you really going to just go back into another corporate job?" And and then I sat with that question. I was like, "Am I really going to go back to a corporate job?" And I was like, "No, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to figure something else out." And it was interesting because it took me a while. I burned out and I full out quit my job. So that was step one. And then it was the reclaiming. It was kind of like this time where I was like trying to reconnect with myself, figure out what do I enjoy, what do I like, what really lights me up inside. And I realized it was funny. Someone was asking me this recently. I was like, how did I end up here? I ended up here because I realized when I would tell people my journey of quitting my job and moving into a different thing, I saw them making big changes in their lives. And I
Mm.
saw people around me like leave jobs, leave relationships, leave things that weren't serving them anymore. And I was like, what if I can do more of that? What if I can help more people change their path, change the thing that is no longer serving them? And
Mm.
that's what led me to start the podcast. That's what led me to start my coaching business. Like that feeling was what sparked all of this.
So, did you start your podcast first before coaching?
I signed up for my coaching program at the same time that I decided to start my podcast. But yes, technically, yes, I started my podcast before I really started coaching.
Oh my gosh, kudos to you because honestly, I hear so many people that want to start a podcast but don't.
Hmm.
It's the technical stuff that freaks them out. It's I mean so many things, right? But underlying the root of that is just being seen.
Yes.
And so kudos to you for being like, I'm just gonna do a podcast. Right.
You know, I looking back on it, I feel like I think there was something like it was an intuition kind of thing that just it spoke to me.
Hmm.
And there was a part of me that was crazy. And it's funny because I've been reflecting on the word crazy a lot, where I'm like, we think crazy is bad. And I don't agree with that. I think crazy is good. I think
Hmm.
crazy is what creates a beautiful, wild, amazing life is being crazy. So I lately I've been thinking about it and I'm like, I think I want to be crazy.
I love that. I love that, right? Because you think about the people in history who have really made such an impact and difference, and those are the ones with really, really big, strong, bold visions that are
Yeah.
so much beyond themselves that they are. I mean, they are crazy to think a way that is just beyond the paradigm that we're living, where someone will probably think or say, "Are you effing crazy? Like, how is that going to happen?" Like, and sometimes people with
Yes.
big, bold visions don't necessarily understand the how, but it's that vision. And it's so funny because I think maybe a couple months ago, I was watching the documentary on Arnold Schwarzenegger on
Mm,
Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it. It's
I've
really
not.
good. It's really good, and I'm surprised because I'm not an Arnold fan, didn't really care for him. But I watched this documentary on Netflix, and he has been so successful in three very different industries. First, it was professional wrestling, and then it was obviously being an actor, and then him as the governor. And they
Hmm.
are so, so, so different. And one scene he says, like, why wouldn't my dreams come true if I have the vision? Then of course. And it's almost like this blind arrogance where you don't know what you don't know and it kind of works in
Yeah.
your favor. Um and so I just love that you were just like, no, I'm gonna do this podcast. And it wasn't like, oh, but the technical stuff or this stuff or that stuff. And so I love that.
Yeah, I will say it took me, I think about 6 months before I launched, but it was one of those things where I was like, I made like a list and I just like checked a little bit, checked a little bit. And then I got to the point where I was like, I think I checked all the boxes. Like, I think I could actually do this now. And then I got scared and I kind of panicked. And then I had, one of my yoga teachers who was like, I'm going to come on your show. Let's do it. Let's record. And I was like, okay, I guess we're doing this now.
Oh,
So
I
that's how
love
it
that.
happens.
It's like the universe stepped in because sometimes
Mhm.
with ourselves, if someone asks us, are we ready? We'll say no. And then someone else says,
Yeah,
no, you're absolutely ready. So
that's
I love
exactly
that.
right.
I love that.
Yeah, so I would love to hear a little more about your story. So, how did you start your podcast and get into coaching yourself?
Oh my goodness. So I would say my spiritual journey it really started in 2010. And it's funny because you're in New York, you're based in New York, and this was
Mhm.
at a time when I was based in New York also. So I have a lot of fond memories of that city. And I was getting sober at the time. And so it just completely opened me up to a new way of life, a new way of truly being present, a new way of connecting with people. And through that, my spirituality and my path just grew because I was working with so many different people, learning all these different tools, connecting with people in such a different way. And naturally, because of all the things that I was learning, because I was also working with a meditation teacher, I just started sharing what I was being
Mhm.
taught without the idea of like, oh, how can I monetize this one day? Because just like you,
Mhm.
my priority was let me see what job I could could, get in a corporate setting and make money that way. My parents, they're immigrants, so I'm first generation American, Filipino American, and so their dream became my dream, right? They sacrificed so much for me to come here. So I'm just going to get a corporate job, work my way up the ladder. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my MBA. I mean, the whole purpose for me for getting my MBA was just like, I need to make more money. And a lot of the jobs that I want required MBA. So that's what I'm going to do. That's the next step I'm going to do. And so even though spirituality was very much a part of my life, it was never this thing of, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur one day. Even though it was funny because I low key secretly wanted to be an entrepreneur. I remember signing up for Marie Forleo's B School class, not even having an idea of what I wanted to do, but I was so infatuated with her and Gabby Bernstein at the time because they were like, the cool women entrepreneurs telling you can have a life that you love. And, I would watch their videos religiously. But I was like, no, but I'm on the corporate track. But like, sure, it would be cool to do what they were doing, but I don't know anybody that's actually doing what they're doing. So I don't know if it's possible. These are like superstar women to me, and that's not possible for me. Like, that's what I thought, even though I had their programs. And so I was like, okay. But like you, what ended up happening was being burnt out at my job. And so, like the pandemic caused that spaciousness for you to really reflect and think, that's exactly what happened to me. So, in 2020 or in 2017, I moved from New York back to the Bay Area, where I'm actually from, in San Francisco area. And I just remember being here, finishing my MBA in 2020. So I was doing it for 3 years part time. And I was working my full time job. And I just remember, working from home. And then there were no bells and whistles. A lot of the perks were taken away. And I thought, do I actually like my job? Do I want to do this day to day? I actually don't. And I remember one of my colleagues was taking her coaching certification program, and she and I had a lot of similarities. We were into spirituality. We talked a lot about personal development. And I called her and I asked her so much about her program. And I decided, well, you know what? Like, why not? Why not just do a coaching certification program and just see what it's about? And I did it, and I found out that a lot of the frameworks that we were using and learning were stuff that I had already done with people, just in conversations with friends. And so it was very innate, it was very natural. And it was like, I always knew that I wanted that life of being a motivational speaker, of being a coach. And so it was nice to be able to take those steps to actualize it, but then to actually see it kind of scared me. And I was just very risk averse. So I tested it and I said, okay, well, if I actually want to leave my job, let me create a plan for a year. I created a plan for a year, and I said, okay, well, let me start coaching people and see if I actually like it. And so I did all these free coaching sessions for people that were close to me. And then I created a money management plan of what would it actually look like to leave my job. So I saved money. And then I joined all these different coaching programs to help me take the leap. So one of them was Six Figure Saver, which basically helps you manage your money if you are an entrepreneur, because you have variable income. And what does that actually look like when you leave your 9 to 5? So I did a lot of those things. And then finally I thought like, okay, well, what am I waiting for? And so I hired a business coach, and then I launched my business. And when I would meet people, I wouldn't tell them that I also work in corporate. I would just tell them, oh, I'm a life coach. Like, and then so that's where I am today. Like, obviously it's morphed when I first launched it publicly versus now, which I'm sure you can relate to, of like the evolution of your business. But it's I mean, it's the wildest ride. I don't know if you felt this, but it was like there was so much of my monkey mind on the precipice of making that decision. But once I did it, there was just so much freedom.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so interesting hearing your story because you were saying how like there was a part of you that felt like this was where you were going to go. I had such a different experience. I
Oh,
had this thing
really?
yeah, it's so funny hearing you say that because I will tell you, so very funny random story. In like, I think this might have been like 2013 or 2014, this woman randomly stopped me on the street, like kind of, she was like what's the word? Did like readings and stuff like that. And
Uh-huh.
she goes, I have to tell you something. She was like, I have to tell you that you're going to run your own business one day. And she told me some other things. Like things are going to get easier, even though they've been hard. I don't remember. But anyway, the point is that one
Wow.
stuck with me. She said, you're going to run your own business one day. And it's so funny because at that time, I was like, this lady's insane. Because
Wow.
I was like, I'm going to work in corporate for the rest of my life. Like, I am going to work for someone for the rest of my life. Like, that was my mentality. And coaching was like, I didn't even know what it was. Like, none of these things, like becoming a podcaster, I was like, that's for other people. Like, none of these things were anywhere in the realm for me. So
Wow.
it was like a big, like, it was shocking to me, honestly, thinking back on that. And I was like, oh my God, she was right. And I was like
Wow.
completely convinced she was wrong.
That's amazing to have that woman come up to you and
Yeah.
auspiciously give you that fortune telling information.
I know. It was so wild. And it's so funny because at the person I was with at the time, like he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I
Wow.
was like, oh, that's his thing. I was like, I'm gonna be the like steady one over here, and like he's gonna be the entrepreneur. And like now it's like reversed, and I'm just kind of like, oh, that manifested in a way I did not expect.
Oh my goodness. And so do you ever think, do you ever have those moments where you do want to be in corporate?
Now?
Uh-huh.
No. No, I don't.
Mm,
And it's interesting because when I think about it, so I I thought of myself in a certain way, when I was in
yeah.
corporate, and I was like, I played the role well, is how I see it.
Mm,
But now that I'm not in it, it's hard for me to imagine doing that anymore because to me my life is so much about being in my own flow and being able to have control of my own time and doing, like I go to yoga at noon on Thursdays and like for an hour and a half, and like nobody's,
mm.
it's not an issue because like I build my life around that, right? Like I get to choose how I live. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's funny because as much as I just told you, like, I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. Now
Mm,
it's like, I can't imagine not being my own boss. Like, it suits
mm,
me so well in a way that I
mhm,
did not expect and that I don't think I could have foreseen until I was
mhm.
there.
You know what's so interesting? This limiting belief that I have, like, it's only recently that I started struggling with it. Two
Mm,
things about that. And I guess it's like being so conditioned to the hustle culture,
mm-hmm.
like living for someone else. Like I've been having recently this thoughts of, am I not working hard enough in my business?
Oof, yes.
And is that the reason why I'm not seeing results? And it's so interesting because my partner, he has a corporate job and he works around the clock. Like he works around the clock. And it's like when you're in that position, you feel like you don't have an option, right? Like you feel,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you felt that. I felt like I didn't have an option. Like one of the things that I really disliked was not being able to wake up when I wanted to wake up, but waking up because someone put a meeting on my calendar. And I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't like that slave like mentality. And so recently I started thinking, well, do I need to work hard as if I'm working in a corporate job? And so it's kind of like, how do we decondition ourselves of like, what does it mean to work smarter, not harder? And I'm so used to, well, I used to wake up at like, I used to have meetings at 7 a.m. And because I was working global hours. And I mean, me from my ideal day, I don't start till 11 a.m. Like that's just for me. It works for me. I feel better. Yeah, you're my first meeting today. It's 11 a.m. my time. Um, but I had that thought and I'm like, do I need to work around the clock? But I didn't, start my own business to become burnt out again because I ended up getting
Oh
adrenal
yeah.
fatigue from my last business and or like my last business from my corporate career. But that's what's coming up for me right
Ugh,
now.
I totally hear you. So to be honest, it's something I don't talk about a lot, but I burned out in my business last year. And it
Mm.
was so eye-opening to me because what was happening was exactly what those thoughts. I think that
Wow.
I think that there's this thing where we want to apply we're so used to working in a certain way, right? Like we're used to being in the hustle and the grind of
Mhm.
having these kind of this mentality of like you have to work so hard in order to get what you want and like all these kind of like tendencies that we have from
Mm.
corporate, and then we try and apply them to our business. And I it's like I burned out that way. Like I pushed
Mhm.
myself so hard. I was trying to apply be like, well, if I really like want to make this happen, then I got to work around the clock and do all these things. And it was so not serving me, and it made me realize like, no, you left corporate in order to create something different. And
Mhm.
you left corporate to like cr- to find your own path. And to me it's like, yes, you can hustle. It's so interesting because I keep seeing these people online that are like,
Mhm.
you got if you're gonna make it as an entrepreneur, you gotta like start your day at 7 a.m. and start working the moment you wake up in the morning and go 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 go. And I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. And because I'm with you, like I start my mornings at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, because but it's I wake up and I do a lot of spiritual practice, and like to
Mhm.
me it's like I have to fill my own cup in order to do the work I do. And I had to let go of the guilt, right? There's like this
Mhm.
like guilt feeling that we have to like do things a certain way and live by other people's standards. And as you were saying, this whole idea of like, oh, I had to wake up and start my day at 7 a.m. because someone put a meeting on my calendar. And it's
Mhm.
like, but we're still living in that mentality sometimes, going like, oh, well, normal life is that we have to start and work a 9 to 5 or 7 to whatever, and be on the schedule of this like normal life. And it's like, but is that working for you?
I
And
know.
yeah,
Yeah, like that's the thing that we have to continually ask ourselves is this working for us? And to
yeah,
stop and question those things that have been giving to us. And because I mean, being in this industry and in any industry, there are so many different pieces of advice that you're going to be getting from someone. And
yes.
we have to do our own fact checking of does this work for me? And, it's so easy to think just because someone has, I don't know, certain metrics they're hitting, it's so easy for me to think, okay, well, if that's what they're doing, then that's the formula that's going to replicate their success. And I just need to do that. I need to do this. Like, it's exhausting. Oh my
Yes.
God. Yeah. Yeah. It's so exhausting.
It's so true. I think we all have this idea where it's like, well, if it worked for them, it should work for me. And if it
Hmm.
doesn't work for me, there's something wrong with me.
Oh
Right?
my
Like
gosh.
that's the thought we're having. Like it worked for them, why is it not there's something wrong with me. I can't make it work.
Yes.
No.
No, but it's so true. It's so true. Okay, I probably didn't do it right, or when, like, how or when did they do this? Like, it's so funny. I'm all about timelines, right? I'm like, oh, so what can I expect? Like, and that's just me trying to control something where I'm just afraid of the unknown or all that
Mhm.
stuff. And I think that's the hardest part about being an entrepreneur is that it really tests your spiritual principles and your values and your life and your practice in a way that no one talks about. Nobody really
Oh
talks
yeah.
about. And I think I wish people were more honest about that. And so I would love to know, because we both really vibe off of our spiritual practices. We're both yoginis. And in the green room, you were telling me about your 1,000-hour program, which I'm so excited to dive into. Um, but what are the spiritual practices that have been the tenets of you being able to live the way you do beyond, choosing this path, right?
Yeah, for me, my spiritual practice is my foundation. And
Mhm.
I think about that a lot where it's like I wouldn't be able to do what I do without it. And I feel like when I'm out of sync with my practices is when I end up feeling like I'm being too hard on myself, where I end up kind of
Mhm.
like that. The burnout came when I was like not grounding within myself, right? So, as I said, I spend my mornings like in a lot of spiritual practice. I do self Reiki, I journal,
Ooh.
I do pranayama, meditation, and some yoga. Like I do a lot, and I know that's not for everyone. And it's so funny because I will tell you. When I was working my corporate job, I woke up as late as humanly possible, and like scrambled around my house and then darted out the door. And I find it so funny because now I wake up earlier, which is so ironic because I want to do my practice because it's
Mhm.
that's the time for me. And I have my yoga practice throughout the week, and so I'm like I have to go to my class with my teacher. I study with my wonderful 84-year-old yoga guru Sri Dharma Mitra, who is very,
Wow.
very near and dear to my heart. He is my inspiration for all of this.
Mm.
But for me, it's like yoga has taught me to so many things, countless things. But I think some of the things in terms of entrepreneurship, it has really helped me be like recently, really like letting go of the timeline, letting go
Mm.
of like needing that control. Like I think very recently, it's especially through the 1,000-hour teacher training I was just doing, it was so much of like, how do I surrender more to
Mm.
what is? How do I come back to the present moment? How do I change my definition of what is success and what it means to be productive and what it means to have done a good job? Like all of these things are so wired from corporate for me that I had to kind of unravel them and come back home to like what feels good to me and what feels like right for me. And so but yeah, that letting go has been so 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 important because I think especially as entrepreneurs, we want everything to happen a certain way and we want everything to happen right now. And it's I've been learning to let go and trust that things are going to come as they're supposed to. Like we're meant to have this conversation right now and
Mhm.
share this moment together. And so it's been a letting me, I don't know, just enjoy the process of building and creating without having these numerical or, these hard deadline. And yes, we need those to a certain degree to inspire us, but not to have them hold us back and end up crippling us, which I think happens to a lot of people. I hope that
Mhm.
makes sense. There's so many more. I'll think of them as we're talking, but I wanted to
Uh,
start there.
yeah, no, and I love that. I love that you put your spiritual practice first before everything, right? Like oftentimes I think about, and I heard this before from someone, it's how you prepare your day, right? It's like I'd rather prepare for my day than repair my day at the very end. And
Mm.
it's so interesting because every, my sadhana, my daily spiritual practice, it's different. And all I know is that I have one, but like what I tend to do is different every day, dependent on how I feel, the time that I choose to wake up. Um, and today I did something different where I actually journaled first before I did my meditation, my asanas, and I found that because I activated my monkey mind and the things that I needed to do, my actual practice was diluted because already in
Ooh.
my mind, I filled it with the thoughts of what I needed to do. And so even when I was just sitting there and listening to mantras, um, I was doing it, but I still wasn't fully present. My
That's
mind was
so
somewhere else.
interesting.
And so I noticed for me that as soon as I wake up, I just need to do it. I cannot engage with this in my mind. And I'm pointing to my mind for people that are just listening. Um, because it's one of the most, like, it's engaging with the ego, right? It's
Yeah.
totally engaging with the ego. And so I felt that today. And so I knew, I was like, okay, I cannot journal before I begin my practice. I have to do it afterwards or later on in the day. Because I do notice a difference for sure.
What's funny is I actually journal first.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, but for me, it's interesting because for me it's that I'm dumping out the monkey mind where I
Mm.
almost am like releasing whatever thoughts are kind of clouding up in my head and I throw them onto the paper and it gives me clear space to do my sadhana.
Oh my gosh, mine is so different because it's like my mind, like before, if I even journal, then my mind already gets filled with all of the mantras first. And then I feel like it's
Mm.
brushing my teeth first. That's what that
Right.
is for me. Yeah. Oh, so that's so interesting.
Yeah,
Oh,
super
very interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. But tell me more about this. I don't think I've ever heard of 1,000 hour yoga program. I've heard of 500, 300, 200. I didn't know 1,000 existed. I thought that was just accumulated over time.
I mean, it is
Wow.
still an accumulation. I think it's really just, I mean, I've only heard of it at my yoga school at Dharma Yoga Center. But yeah, so it's like 200, 500, which is kind of the normal kind of path and what is Yoga Alliance certified and all that kind of fun stuff. But yeah, they add on two more programs. So one is considered 700 and one is 800, and combined the
Wow.
two make 1,000. And the way that our training works is that each one you learn a different set of classes basically or a different series that you're teaching. So it's like 200 you learn like the beginner and the gentle series, and then 500 you learn 2 and 3 like intermediate classes. And then the next one it's like you learn 800 it's Dharma 4, psychic
Wow.
development and yoga nidra. And then this last one that I just did is you learn charging practice, which is kind of more of a hatha style course
Ooh.
and classes, and then pranayama and meditation. And so
Mm.
it just, it all just kind of goes deeper and deeper. And it's funny, we were joking about it where it was like, oh, now what do we do after you finish them? And my classmates and I were like, we're just going to keep auditing. Like they can't get rid of us. We're the eternal students.
Oh my gosh, but how wholesome. That's beautiful that it's like it's scaffolding curriculum where they just build off of each
Yeah.
other one after the other. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's funny because someone was asking me like, is it really that different like what you're learning?
Mm.
And it's funny because when I was asked this question, I was like, yeah, I think it is. And then I thought about it more and I was like, I think what it really is that you're different. It's like as you're
Oh,
going through it, you're
uh-huh.
evolving, right? Like you're taking in the information differently. It's funny because I think about it like my teacher,
Right.
Dharma, he is pretty much repeating himself all the time. Like I've heard him tell the same stories over and over again. But it's so funny because one day that same story that you've heard probably 50 times, it'll hit you completely differently. You're going like, "Oh my God, that's what that meant." Or like, it just applies to something going on in your life like totally differently. And I love when that happens because it's just like, yeah, it's like we're evolving through these trainings.
Oh my God, I love that. And it's true because you can only it's sometimes when you get certain lessons, it only hits you at the level of your own consciousness.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
And what it means to you at that time. And it's interesting because I have and that's what we share too, right? It's just our love of yoga.
Mhm.
We're both yoginis. And I think I was telling you before when we first chatted that I got into my tantric yoga training. And at the time, in theory, I was excited about it. And then all of a sudden, when I was there, I realized that it was something completely different in a good way, not in a bad way. But
Mhm.
it's like if my conscious knew what I was signing up for, I probably wouldn't have done it. And so it kind of goes back to the, blind arrogance can sometimes be a good thing if you don't know what you don't know. Um, but as you start to dive into this path, I have also become just such a hungry, insatiable student for more. Um, and spirituality is the most important thing in my life above anything else. And I will go to the ends of the earth to always search for more along that path. And like you, I'm doing another yoga training. So I'm doing Kundalini yoga training. And it's funny because I was looking into Kundalini and I actually thought it was too difficult because I didn't want to wake up. I didn't want to wake up early in the morning. I have to wake up at 5 a.m., which means I have to get to the studio, or I have to wake up at 4 to get to the studio at 5.
Oh,
And it's from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays, but luckily it's every other week. But in between, you're also doing your morning sadhanas together at 5 a.m. And
oh wow.
so I just remember thinking, I don't think I'm ready for that. I don't think so, like, but it's just, something draws you. And like you said, you wake up earlier for your practice, even though you thought, when you're working corporate, you woke up later, as late as you could.
Yeah,
So,
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I will tell you, so our training, the one I just did, it starts at 7. I wake up at 5 a.m. every for
yeah.
all these trainings. I'm up at 5. I'm at the studio at 7, and the day goes until 9 o'clock at night. So it's
Oh my
14-hour days, and you
gosh.
are not getting a full night of sleep at the end of that.
No.
And it but it's funny because it's like you get I I mean, the thing is, we do pranayama and meditation every morning in the training, and it
Mhm.
really, I don't know, it stirs up the energy. And so I love, honestly, that's amazing that you're waking up at 4 to start at 5. But I love it because it challenges us in terms of what we think we can do.
Mm.
The first time I did this, I was like, this is impossible. I'm gonna barely survive. Like, and it's funny to what you were saying before. Right before every single one of these trainings, I go to my friends, and they will quote me on this. Every single time I turn to them and I go, I don't know what this training is going to bring, but I know I'm going to be changed forever coming out of it. And I have no
Mm.
idea what's going to happen. And what's funny is this last one, I didn't say that. I was like, "Oh, I've already changed enough. Like, it'll be fine." No, it
Yeah.
was still completely life changing.
Oh wow. So what came up for you? What were some of those golden gems?
I just feel like it always goes like a layer deeper, a layer deeper, a layer deeper every single time. And
Mhm.
I don't know, this time it was really feeling oneness. It was really
Oh.
diving into this idea of like every of just everything is one. Like everything is
Mm.
like, if we want to use the word, the or like say the universe is creation. Like it's all one, whatever word you want to use, God or the Lord or the creator. But seeing that oneness of like me versus you versus everyone around me, but seeing us all as like one, and really feeling into that feeling where I'm like, well, if we're all one, then my progress is everyone's progress. If we're seeing
Oh,
all
beautiful.
as one, then me helping someone else is helping all of us. And it would just that to me, what I think was the biggest gem that I took from this training. And it just, I don't know, it just made me feel so much peace and so
Mm.
much just this ability of seeing myself in everyone else, and like finding more love and care for every person, every living being beyond just people.
Oh, that sounds so beautiful. So beautiful. Your friends must appreciate it every time you go to yoga training because they're like, Oh, Jess is even more compassionate and nicer.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
life-changing. I did not expect that at all going in. I had no idea what to expect,
mm,
but that was,
mhm.
and there were so many other
Yeah.
moments. But yeah, the other thing I didn't mention is this training, we have to do a talk on ahimsa, which is
Oh, uh-huh. Uh-huh.
nonviolence. And yeah, and so I was talking about compassion and for me, it's really self-compassion and how do we treat ourselves with more kindness and be able to really be more compassionate towards ourselves first and then towards others, which I think is so important. But yeah, so that was also part of the training. So a lot of thoughts around compassion and ahimsa.
It's so interesting because I remember when I first took my training, I honestly just thought I was just gonna learn asanas. Like that was it. And then teach people. I'm like, okay, it's a yoga teacher training. Teacher, I'm gonna just teach yoga afterwards. And I always think, I'm like, how come no one tells you you're gonna learn more? How come no one tells you you're gonna be changed? And because I did mine in Greece, so I was there for a month.
Oh,
And
wow.
but we did different talks. We had to do talks on the yamas and the niyamas, and if anything, I realized, oh, this is a yogini training. This is not a yoga teacher training. They teach you how to be a yogini first before, and that's embodying that way. And then I realized, oh, in the West, I find there are a lot of yoga fitness instructors, but not necessarily
Mhm.
yoga teachers, which is
Yes.
such a stark contrast to what we learned. And I had that awakening to it. And it's funny because I had only done vinyasa before.
Me
And
too.
right, like in New York, it's so popular. You're in and out. Like I was doing it at Crunch at 12 p.m. Like during my lunch break with my boss, and like it was yoga sculpt, right? Like that was it. That was it. And so I was like, I don't understand the spiritual effects people get. Like I just did not get it. And so I never considered myself a yogi. I just did Pilates instead, or just sculpting classes. And then when the yoga the tantric yoga was definitely more, it was more hatha. It was like hatha based yoga that was just really slow. And then I said, oh, this is interesting. And then I found a local studio near my apartment, and I'm obsessed with slow hatha. Like I am so obsessed. I'm like, I don't understand why people do vinyasa. I don't understand why they do all this. I'm like, that is way too much for me. But it just, you get deeper into it. And so I love that this journey just kind of unfolds over time. And like you said, you start to teach yourself things, especially when you're able to do those hard things, right?
Yes.
And it
Yes.
like it definitely alludes back to like being able to understand your ego, work with your ego. And that's why I love Kundalini so much, and that's the reason I'm getting trained in it, is because I find that it is the yoga where you see a way through every block. If there's a certain thing
Mm.
that's going on, there's a kriya for that. Like there's just a kriya for everything. And there are sets of kriyas specifically for women, which I am just super excited about to share and do workshops on, and just have and be able to armor people with more tools, right? To show up in their day.
Oh, absolutely. I feel so similarly about pranayama, especially after this
Mhm.
training, where it's like, yeah, it's like it's your medicine cabinet, right? I'm sure you feel
Mhm.
that way about the kriyas. So it is amazing. It's funny that like hearing you say that because my teacher training is called Life of a Yogi is the name of their
Oh,
teacher training. And it's funny. So similar to the entrepreneur thing, when I did my first 200 hour, I went in going, I'm not going to teach yoga. I went in
yeah.
going, I'm just trying to deepen my practice over here. Like I had no intention of teaching yoga.
Mhm.
And it's funny because someone did tell me it's going to change your life. And I was like, I don't understand what that means. It was like such a
Yes.
foreign concept.
Totally. Totally. It's kind of like that woman going up to you saying, "Hey, you're gonna own your own business one day." You're like, "Okay, sure." Yeah, because people do
Exactly.
that. People do that. Like someone did that to me too. They're like, "Oh, your life's gonna be so changed." I'm like, "Okay, sure."
Yeah, you're like, okay. Yeah, I've had so many moments where people say these things to me, and I'm like, all right, like, whatever. Like, I'm just going to do it. I'll see what happens. And then, like, here we are. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, it was true. It was life changing.
Oh my God. Yeah, because when I even came back from my training, I remember telling my partner, "Oh, I just want to live in an ashram for like 6 months." And, never ever had had the desire to even visit India, before I started that and even do yoga teacher training. So it's just, I think it's interesting, like life, how you can't be surprised by anything, right? Because
Oh,
you're always
yeah.
constantly changing and expanding, and even what we think in our finite mind, that's just with the finite mind, but it's just so infinite, all the different possibilities of where we could go.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I'm
Mhm.
curious, like, how has it been with, like, how has your family taken, like, all the different changes that have happened in your life?
Oh, well, what's interesting, because the person that experiences it the most is my partner, right? I mean, I live
Mm.
with him. But with my family, the hardest thing, and this is what, was the biggest resistance, was, they were not supportive of when I quit my 9 to 5. They were very not supportive. My dad would just say it
Mm.
was a horrible idea. Same with my mom. We're always in this impending recession that keeps coming up, and all these different things. And that's what they have learned, is getting a corporate job is the most safe and secure way. And um, so that's what really, really made the decision and taking the action steps longer, was because I didn't have their support. And it was hard because I had to not even share that. Now it's kind of like,
Mm.
okay, they won't ask me about what I do. My mom will ask me, "Oh, don't you miss making money like your corporate job?" Like, or like she went to the Philippines the other day. Her and my dad, like they went for 6 weeks, and I really wanted to go with them before, and my mom was making fun of me, saying, "Oh, well, Lisa can't go because she's not making enough money." And so that's how we joke about it. And my dad, he laughs and says, because we talk about, I mean, it's common knowledge that our younger generations just don't want to work as hard as like baby boomers. It's so common.
Mhm.
And my dad said, "Yeah, I don't understand what's with the younger generation. They just don't want to work." He's like, "Yeah, Lisa, she's not working." Like, and it's like, it's like, we can laugh about it now, right? We can laugh about it
Mhm.
now. But I've just accepted that they don't ask me, and that's fine. But I think it's important for me to still continue doing what I, do. And I actually do pray to my ancestors, because they were entrepreneurs. So it's interesting, because both sets of my grandparents, they were entrepreneurs.
Mm.
So I do pray to my grandmas. My grandma was a teacher, and so, but we also had a fish pond business in the Philippines, and like I love teaching. And then also with my other grandma, she was an entrepreneur. She had her own business, and um, so it's like part of my lineage. It's part of my family. But I would say the person that really experiences the most change is my partner. So, and he's just been very supportive, because when we first met, I was doing my MBA. I was very much in the corporate track. And then all of a sudden, when you do have a partner and you make those changes of like a full-time corporate job to running your own business, obviously it has like financial implications. Um, and just what you desire, and even how you want to live your life, right?
Yeah.
So not being tied to location, right? And then what does that mean? Because he is working in corporate. And so yeah, so it's always new every month. God bless his soul.
I mean that is amazing though that he's been with you through this journey and is like yeah, and still you're making it work and you're like working with each other through such a big life change. So that like
Mhm.
kudos to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing that I was picking out of there was when you said your dad is saying like, well, Lisa's not working. Don't you find that really ironic? So my dad has actually said the same thing about me.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and to the point where my aunt has said it about me because my dad was clearly saying it to her. And I found that statement so ironic because don't you think you're working the hardest you've ever worked in your entire
Oh
life?
my gosh. Oh my gosh. I mean, the level of stress is unparalleled. I find being an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. And it's interesting because we have this false sense of security that if we're in a corporate job that we have a steady paycheck. I mean, sure, it does appear like that, right? But if you actually, and you worked in finance, like if you work in the finance department, you see that every single month you are making different profits and that there just
Mhm.
happens to be management in a way where everyone gets their paycheck, right? Which
Right.
as an entrepreneur, you are privy to that information and you are responsible for creating and generating revenue and understanding those different levers that will create all of that. And so it's interesting because you need to be operating at a higher caliber and you're learning so much and you're almost being a scientist at the same time. You're just constantly iterating and pivoting and trying new things. Whereas in a job, it's like so cush. Like not to like diminish or be reductive to people who are doing, really hard corporate jobs, but once your basic necessities are met, you don't have to think about those other things where you have a finance department, where you have, maybe a business operations or COO. But when you're a sole proprietor, you're just privy to everything and you're working around the clock. You're doing your own admin, like all of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it's definitely like you have to wear so many hats and
Mhm.
and some of those are not necessarily hats that you want to be wearing all the time and figuring that out is definitely its own challenge. It's funny cuz like I actually for me I think the stress is just different. Like it's a different
Mm.
kind of stress
Mhm.
because before, obviously we both burned out in our jobs. So that was like a certain kind of stress that was going on.
Mhm.
And I did find like my corporate job very, very stressful. And it's not that this is definitely stressful in its own way because it's all on me, right? Because I have to
Mhm.
figure things out and run the show. And there isn't like a backup, there's no one going like, oh, well, when you're not here, like someone else just takes over. There isn't that. But yeah, it's kind of like how you take on those different unique challenges. And yeah, it definitely, I think to me, it's like entrepreneurship challenges you to your core, to like like your deep wounds will come
Mhm.
up through entrepreneurship. Like my deep wounds of like not wanting to be seen was one of mine. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
we're on here, this is going to get posted to YouTube, Instagram, and wherever. And and it took me a long time to like work through that. How do I feel about people seeing me and talking about my
Mhm.
experience and being vulnerable, and I think we all go through different kinds of hitting our like old wounds and having to like
Mhm.
repair and work through them.
I love that you talk about being seen because that's one of the things that I experience, and that's one of the things I see so many people experience, or one of the biggest blocks before they actually do anything that relates to
Yeah.
their dharma, their purpose, because it does require them to be seen in a different way. And what's interesting is I like even on Instagram, I remember I would just post static images, have captions, all of that stuff. And then one of my girlfriends said, I think maybe you would be more successful if you did videos so people can actually experience your energy. And at first, I just thought, well, can't they experience that in my writing? Like, like, and then I remember I had to shoot so many videos because I was so critical of myself. I didn't know what to say. I felt super awkward. And then all of a sudden, I was using the front camera and then you had to watch yourself. And then I thought that was weird. And then eventually you just get over it and you just stop caring. You do it so many times, right? I don't know if that's how you felt. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you just do it. And then it's like, okay, whatever. Like, whatever. And so anytime I think of doing something new, I'm like, okay, remember when, like, this was my evolution of podcasting. So I literally scripted everything out. I scripted everything out because I wasn't using video. And so it looked as if I was just talking free flow. Like, even though I wrote it free flow, and then it looked as if it was just very organic. And then eventually I said, this is taking me too damn long. It's taking me how many hours, like writing it. And I was like, oh my God, girlfriend, you need to chill. You need to chill. And so I was on a podcast with one of my girlfriends, and obviously you can't really script out an interview. Like, you and I are just jamming right now, And I asked her, I said, do you think, like, based off of, being interviewed by her, we were interviewing each other. I was like, do you think I'd be able to do it naturally? She's like, oh, yeah, you're totally fine. You can do it. You can do it. She's like, you were great. And so that gave me the gumption of like, oh, okay. And so and then that's how I do it. Yeah.
I
But it's
love
baby
that.
steps. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny because I've never scripted actually,
Mhm.
but my thing has been me noticing all my ums, all my you knows, and
Mm.
all my filler words and all that. So it's different journey, but it's always been the same. It was such a fear of just showing up, being on video was a huge thing that I only started doing last November. So
Mhm.
I totally feel you where it's just like it is this kind of like unraveling and you're like, "Oh, this way that I'm doing it right now, people keep pushing you a little bit." And I love that your friend was like, "Oh, like, yeah, you can do it." Sometimes you need someone else to go to you and go, "You can totally do this." And then you're
Yes.
going, wait, I think I can. And you start to take on their belief until it becomes your belief, which I think is so powerful. So I think that's so cool that it got you there.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And it's interesting because there's this another project that I'm working on that I haven't launched it publicly. And I was on a coaching call, and the coach said, "Well, I think you're ready." And I said, because she asked me, she's like, "Oh, do you think you can sell that?" I said, well, if you ask me, I don't think it's ready. And then she started asking me what I've been doing for it. And she said, okay, you're ready. You need to launch it. Da, da, da. And I was like, what? Why did I ask that question? I have to be accountable for it. Because at the end of the day, like, my underlying fear is no one's going to care. No one's going to show up to my party.
Mm.
I'm going to look like a fool. Uh, it's like you're the girl that gives invitations out to your party and then no one RSVPs. Like, at the end of the day, like, that's my biggest fear.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's so funny because you point out how it keeps coming up, right? Like this core fear of being seen. It's like every time you have to do a different type of thing, it
Yes.
comes up all over again. And you're like, well, like with podcast versus video, it's like, well, I got comfortable talking on into this microphone. That was good. And then you add another layer and you're like, oh dear God, I don't know if I can do this like, all over again.
It's true because it gets easier when you just talk to your podcast. Because I recently just did video podcasts, only just recently. And so the fact that you started talking about like, oh, I did it in November. And then so I remember doing it and I thought, this is really strange. Like, and you'll see the evolution of my videos where it's like I put my camera in a different area. It's like above me at a different altitude. So you're just like seeing my scalp. It's like so funny. I'm like, oh my God, now I know like all these little gimmicks and yeah, it's just like growing up
Yes.
being babies.
I love it. It cracks me up because yes, I've gone through the exact same thing. Like even the other day, I was watching one and I was because I will read off sometimes like the intro that I do, and
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not looking at the camera, and I'm like finicking about that, thinking, should I re-record it? And then I sat there going, you're gonna do this again. Just freaking release it. You're gonna do another one. It'll be fine. No one
Yes,
cares.
yes. And you know what's interesting? Because I too, I noticed the filler words in mine. And honestly, so I use Descript software to edit it. And then I just put, okay, AI, pick all the filler words, delete. Like that's what I do. That's podcast magic for you. Like I love debunking these things that like it may seem perfect, right? On social media because all the content's curated, the quality, all of that stuff. But I find it does a disservice to other people who aren't where we are or who have a desire to do it because it teaches them like, no, this is just the behind the scenes. And I love that we're being transparent, we're honest, we're real about it because sometimes it's like at the end of the day, we are still running a business, even though we have the front of business, which is like, being a coach and all of that stuff, but we still have to operate it on the back end. And what does that look like on the day to day? And I feel sometimes I can't really talk about it, even though it's something that I get so juiced up about, because it isn't what I really sell, right? Like I don't sell business coaching, even though I'll offer a lot of advice to like different friends and I'll tell them and they'll pick my brain. And then one day I'm just like, oh, should I do business coaching? And I was like, Lisa, just stick to one thing. Just stick to one thing, girl. People are gonna get confused. Like, do you need to create another Instagram account? Oh my God. That's like the daily struggle in my life.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're coming up on an hour. That went so freaking fast. Is there anything
I
else you want
know.
to cover off on before we start to wrap up?
I feel like we could talk on so many different things. We'll just have to do other episodes together. But this was just so much fun. I find when I do podcast recordings, it's very refreshing. And so I'm glad that I got to connect with you. I'm glad my audience will get to know you and your spiritual path. And but this has just been wonderful.
It's been so fun. Do you want to do my final questions that I always do at the end of
Oh
my
my
podcast?
God. Yes, yes, yes. I'm curious. I'm on the hot seat now.
All right, let's do it. Okay, first question is, how would you describe your current relationship to yourself?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I did notice that I was becoming very harsh with myself and I had to bring in a lot of compassion. So I'm really, really, really practicing how do I speak to myself in a very loving and gentle way. And I want to put a plug in for flower essences. So I use Lotus Way, but that is one of the ones I'm working with is just being kinder and more gentle with myself.
I love that. Awesome. All right. What do you consider most valuable to you right now?
Oh my gosh. Um, it's three things. So my cat that I absolutely love, he's a Maine Coon. I've had him for almost 13 years in August. My partner, who I absolutely love, I'm obsessed with him. I'm obsessed with both of them. And my spiritual practice, like those are the three tenets of my life. Yeah.
I love that. What is the best lesson you've learned recently?
Oof. Okay, so my own personal mantra is I can do hard things. I
Yeah.
can do hard things. I repeat that to myself all the time. So I really feel as if, I don't know, like we were talking about the different obstacles you face, thinking you can't do it. Um, and I remember I was doing surfing lessons in Costa Rica a couple years ago, and the instructor said to me, and he was a yoga instructor and also a surfer, so it was really cool. And he said to me, the waves don't necessarily determine whether or not you're going to have a good day at surfing. It's your mindset. It's how you conquer the fear. It's how you actually look at the wave and know that you can do it. That's what determines whether or not you're actually going to have a good day in surfing. And so it just really reminded me that we can't control the conditions, right? And so I always say to myself, I can do hard things. I know how to do hard things. I will be okay. So I always say that.
Oh, I love that so, so much. Amazing. Okay. Next question is, how would you describe your current dharma or purpose?
Oof, women. I love helping women. I love empowering women. I feel like so I can separate it into three things. It's as if when a woman is in her maiden phase, wanting to mature in that part of her life, where she's starting to get to know herself, where she is entering into her own wild woman phase. Um, a woman wanting to become a mother. So that's the journey that I find myself on now of what are the attributes and qualities that I need to really refine in order to step into that next chapter of my life. And that includes, strengthening my relationship to myself and also with my partner to create that foundation to bring a child in. And then, I have actually a lot of mother friends. My sister is a mother. I took care of her two kids yesterday. And there's something about mothers that I feel they're just not supported. They're not supported at work. They're not supported by our government. Sometimes they're not supported by their partners. And I really want to help them as well. So that's where I really see my dharma as being able to help those different areas that women reach in their lives through somatic practices, through sacred feminine spirituality, or through Kundalini practices and Kriyas, where there are Kriyas specifically for mothers. And so being able to share that knowledge and that medicine cabinet, like you mentioned, is something that I feel so passionate and very deeply in my soul about.
Oh, I love that. All right. The last question is, what do you see as the purpose or meaning of life?
Oof. Oh, I mean, I just think it's just awakening to your own divinity. That's it, right? Releasing
Yeah.
conditioning, like all of that, and just realizing that you are inherently worthy. You don't have to earn anything, prove anything. And what you experience, we are all one. And to find that spiritual meaning of life to you that's unique to you in your own way.
Amazing. I just realized the other thing that we were going to talk about was creativity, and we didn't touch upon that.
Oh, that'll be our next episode.
Yeah.
I feel like we could go so deep into that as well, you know?
I know. I was like, oh man. I mean, that's the thing is I'm like, we could endlessly talk. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Oh,
This
well,
has
this
been
was
so
so
great.
fun.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you so much for, being on my podcast also.
Yeah, thank you for being on my podcast too.
Oh my gosh. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to us, our conversation. Let us know if you want more. Happy to do it.
Absolutely. Well, I am so excited to continue getting to know you and doing more of this. So it's been such a pleasure, and I love how it's like we have like different paths, but they're so similar, and it's just so
Mhm.
beautiful being able to see how like we get to I don't know, kind of like transform these different things that we're taking in and bring them to life. So it's an honor and a privilege to be on this journey with you.
Oh, same, 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 same. And it's funny because I never go on that coaching program call. And so
Mm.
and it's funny, I don't think I told you this. I was manifesting. I was writing in my journal. I was talking about how I wanted to meet other women in this space, especially women that help first and second generation. And you happened to get coached that day. And I saw what you did, and it was, yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? Like you ask the
Oh
universe
yeah.
for something and it conspires and it shows up at your door.
Oh yeah. I could not agree more. I feel that so much. Yeah.
Hmm.
Amazing.
Amazing. But thank you so much.